Hello friends, Mr. E here, and today we will be taking a look at the Recon Lasgun, my choice for the best range weapon on Veteran, to be quite honest. This weapon is super simple to use, to build around, and it just really nails everything about the Veteran class so very well. You can get a ton of effective damage on bosses, on any target with this weapon if you know how to build it right, and that's what the video is going to be all about today. So let's strap in. I'm going to be going over everything about the Recon Lasgun, including the best marks, best blessings, and the talents you should pair with it, as well as just generally how to fight enemies. So let's go. Let's start with the absolute basics for the weapon, such as what are the different marks, what are the pros and cons of using each mark, and then how should we be building this weapon to get the most juice out of it. Let's start with the marks. There are three marks here. There's the Mark 12, the Mark 6C, and the Mark 14, presented in order of fire rate. At the fastest fire rate with the lowest base damage is the Mark 12 up here. It fires 60 damage bullets that are firing at a rate of 20 per second. So that's a total of 1200 DPS if you're keeping track. It has a total ammo value of a little bit north of 1000, and it does fire one bullet or one shot per ammo, so you're going to get a 1-to-1 ratio there. Overall, if you take this number here and you multiply it by this number here, you're ending up with a value around 62,000. Of course, this is going to go up because of the extra damage you can stack from the extra ammo you can have on your class as the Veteran. All that stuff is going to increase this number, but this is a good baseline to understand how much damage is really just like stored inside of the battery packs here. And this one is the lowest of all three of these. So it does have the highest damage per second, but it's missing out on some of that potential damage capacity. And stretching your resources farther with this weapon is one of the things it's best at. And that's why the mark that I have actually turned to using a lot is the Mark 6C here. This represents a nice middle ground between the other two marks. It has a medium fire rate of 11.11 per second with a total damage of 98 per shot. That means that with the amount of ammo that it has here, we're dealing somewhere in the ballpark of 72,000 damage overall, and it's only losing about 100 damage per second when you're firing it. Now, this is going to give us more direct damage, so you have a higher incidence of the direct damage from the bullet killing like smaller targets or being the finishing blow on a lot of targets, and it's just generally a little bit easier to control and not overspray. I think one of the things that can happen when you're using the Mark 12 is that it is so fast that a lot of times when you're on a target and it's a smaller target, like these guys, you'll just kind of overshoot and you'll end up wasting bullets here and there. So I think that it's much better to have a little bit slower fire rate and be able to manage your spray a little bit better, but that's up to your personal preference. I think that the one mark here, as far as the three marks of this weapon, that is kind of weak is probably this last one, the Mark 14. This weapon trades a lot of its attack speed for more direct damage, as you can see there, a hefty 141 on the direct damage, but it only shoots at a rate of 7.7 rounds per second. And that also comes at a cost of the ammo capacity here. It effectively has half this ammo capacity because it takes two ammo per shot. So we end up having a actually quite fast time to reload. Like, we have to reload quite often here. We're reloading about every 7 seconds or so with this weapon, and then this one takes about 10 seconds to get to reload, and this one takes about 9, because this one is taking 2 shots per every ammo. That kind of sucks you dry pretty quick. So I think that in terms of the usefulness of the Recon Lasgun, the thing the Recon Lasgun really wants to do is apply its stacks and hit lots of crits. And if you can do those two things at a pretty frequent rate, then you're doing well. This one just isn't quite frequent enough for my taste, but not to say that it's bad. It's just probably the weakest of the three variants. And this one has a total damage capacity of somewhere in the middle here. It's about at 67,000. So you're not going to have like too little damage. It's just, missing any shots is going to be really valuable here because it doesn't have the biggest ammo capacity comparatively. Next, let's talk about the stats on the weapon. What should your stat layout look like? And it should look something like this, with the minimum being collateral. Reasoning being here, collateral is pretty much nothing on this weapon. Collateral is just an increase to the weapon's stagger, and this weapon has pathetically low stagger. The medium impact version has 1.55, which is next to nothing. If you are staggering any enemies with this weapon, they have long since been killed by the damage of the weapon. So there's really no reason to spec into collateral at all. It's almost no difference even between 60 and 80. So everything else, maxing it out to get more damage, more ammo, and more shots on target with stability, and then mobility is going to make this weapon very, very fast. It is the fastest range weapon in the game for movement. Then we'll talk about the perks up here. So you see I've chosen these two perks: critical strike chance, 5% critical strike chance, and 25% damage versus unyielding. For my money, this is the best setup to go with. Reason being here, this plays to this weapon's strengths hugely. The first strength of this weapon is critical strikes. Critical strikes enable this weapon to do what it does. It extends your ammo, it increases your damage, it increases the amount of procs you're going to get for your very damaging blessings we'll talk about in a second. So yes, please, please, please get that 5% range critical strike. It's so juicy. But the second thing here is unyielding enemies. Unyielding enemies apply to three main types of enemies in the game. That is Reapers, who are pretty dang dangerous. Bulwarks, who you might only have a second to get an open window on, but then you can burn to death. And then bosses. Bosses, big meaty bosses like this, these guys are unyielding. So we're Beast of Nurgle, so we're Plagueogrins, of course. And these guys get absolutely destroyed by this weapon. So just firing like this is going to do so much damage to these guys because we have that extra 25% damage. And whereas on smaller targets, like, you know, the gunners like this, or these gunners, or even our plasma gunners, or our maulers, right, the extra flak damage would make them die like a tiny bit faster. It's generally overkill. This weapon kills very fast on most smaller enemies in the game, especially elites and specialists, so we really don't have to worry about speccing towards those. But this big guy takes a ton of punishment, and having a 25% increased damage against them, as well as a 25% increase against our Reaper friends and our Bulwarks here, it's going to go a really, really long way. So I highly, highly, highly recommend that we go for unyielding there. And definitely stay away from Carapace, because this weapon is next to useless against Carapace. You don't want 25% extra damage on something that's doing 6 damage on hit. Then we will go on and talk about our blessings, and the blessings here are really really powerful. The couple of blessings that we're going to be using are very, very powerful. That's kind of what makes the gun, to be quite honest with you. And for my money, there's only one way to set this up, and I will share that with you now. It is these two talents right here, these two blessings, Infernus and Dum Dum. Let's start with Infernus. Infernus is the bread and butter of this weapon. There was a time in the past where people would play this weapon without Infernus, but I think that's purely insane. Infernus offers so much additional damage to this weapon in any run. Let me just quickly demonstrate. I'm going to go with my scoreboard. Please ignore the amount of losses here, okay? I'm trying. And this is a run with this Recon Lasgun. As you can see here, for my range damage, I had a little bit under 700k, and for my burning damage, I had a little bit under 200k. So I'm dealing almost 20% of my damage as burns. And burn damage, of course, because it's a damage over time, is incredibly efficient and effective because it will finish off enemies you aren't even prioritizing. So if you have a health bars mod, it's going to be really, really advantageous to you because you can mark target up, you can get a couple burn stacks on them, and then you can be like, okay, I'm good. And you can go on to the next target. You can just simply understand that as soon as I see that enemy on fire, okay, he's probably dead from that point. I can move on to shooting something else. No, he's probably dead. I can move on to shooting something else. And it's going to save you a ton of time, a ton of effort. And those burns are very, very compatible with a ton of veteran talents that we'll get into in just a second. So Infernus, number one best blessing to start with on this gun. And then we want to pick a second blessing that works really well with Infernus. And that's where there's really only two options. One of them is Headhunter. People used to pick this all the time because it increases your crit rate, but I think that was mostly before the veteran rework, where crit rate, thanks to reciprocity, is just kind of good enough that we don't have to worry about stacking Headhunter on here. And Headhunter is oftentimes just a little bit overkill. Like, we don't really need to be critting every shot. We just need to crit 3 times fast enough to get those 3 stacks of burn on there and get those enemies dying. No, much more important than Headhunter is to boost the damage of the weapon directly and the burns with Dum Dum. Dum Dum is incredibly powerful as a second talent here because 6% damage stacking 5 times to enemies within 12.5 meters is huge. So to demonstrate how powerful Dum Dum is, let's spawn in a boss. I'm going to light him up here, and I've got 5 Dum Dum stacks, and he is burning for 376 per tick. However, if I let those Dum Dum stacks fall off right now, he drops to 301 without losing any fire stacks. So we are gaining 30% of our burn damage and 30% of our direct damage just by being close-ish to this boss while these fire stacks are on him. And you can see that increased damage, it goes a long way out. I'm still getting a 300, I'm still getting, this is within 12.5 meters apparently. So this is considered quote-unquote close range for Darktide, which is pretty dang massive. And even way out here, it's diminishing returns, but you still get an increased damage at this distance. And this is just going to massively multiply all damage that you do to enemies within your range. So if you've got multiple enemies burning at the same time, all these enemies, their damage stacks, their burn stacks are going to take increased damage from having Dum Dum stacked up on the weapon. So Dum Dum is by far, hands down, the second best blessing to pair on this weapon. Now there is one other option, which is the option to go for a more utility-focused Dum Dum, or utility-focused in the slot of Dum Dum, and that would be with the where is it? Strip Down blessing. So Strip Down right here is a very unique blessing because it has a very unique synergy with the Veteran. And that is in the form of one of his talents that allows us to regenerate our stamina while we're sprinting. Let me go ahead and remove some enemies here, and we'll get ourselves a ranged enemy. So we can do a little Ogre and Gunner here, and we'll let him shoot at us and watch our stamina. So as you can see here, this enemy can't hit me. And as soon as my stamina gets low, it seems to jump back up. Well, that is going on because this blessing gives ranged attack immunity while you're sprinting with over 50% stamina, and this talent right here, Duck and Dive, replenishes 30% of max stamina when you dodge. So it's going to trigger itself and therefore replenish our stamina and cause kind of an infinite feedback loop. So this allows you to play super aggressive, just run out there in the open and be immune to all ranged attacks. However, I don't think it's necessarily that good. You have to trade a talent and a blessing slot in order to get this synergy, and you could instead not take it and go back to focusing on the core of the weapon, which is really boosting those burns to do some absurd stuff, which is what I would recommend. Now let's come over here and talk about the talents that you want to use when you're making a build that uses the Recon Lasgun, because there's a couple in particular that get a ton of mileage out of this gun and vice versa. At the top of the tree, these two talents up here are great for defenses with the Recon because Confirm Kill and Out for Blood, neither one of these specifies any requirements for it must be landed with the direct damage of the bullet. Unlike Exhilarating Takedown, which requires that the bullet itself deal a kill, these two are totally cool with the burn stacks from the Recon claiming that kill. And this is a really great way to passively scoop up a ton of toughness because this weapon is disgusting at killing elites and gunners and specialists and stuff like that. Down here, we've got Superiority Complex, and this is a thing that I'm going to point out, which is that whenever the game says base damage, that is all damage. So that is both our direct damage and our burns, and this is a thing we're going to come back to time and time again. If you're trying to build around the Recon Lasgun, you really want to lean into talents that give you not range damage like this node right here, but instead general damage. So if it just says damage or if it says base damage, those are both really good for our purposes, and this one is going to help us with elites a lot. Then we'll come down here and grab Survivalist. Just an easy way to probably just net neutralize your ammo loss. You can effectively extend your ammo for the entire game if you're using this node right here, and it's really going to make you super self-sufficient so the rest of the ammo can go to the rest of the team. It's just the best quality node all around. Of course, if you already have someone on the team who has this, then you can go for Fire Team. Then over here, we've got Infiltrate. Now, Infiltrate, as I mentioned before, it has a 30% damage, flat damage buff wrapped into it. That's not range damage, it's not melee damage, so it's going to apply to both our burns and our direct damage, which is huge. It multiplies all that and really pumps the numbers up a lot. Then we'll come down here, and of course, voice of command is really good with everything, but Executioner Stance is not very good with the Recon Lasgun. This boosts only the direct damage of the gun, which is not really our focus here. It increases our stagger strength, which is next to 0. It reduces our sway, which is next to 0. It reduces our spread, which is next to 0, and our recoil, which is next to 0, right? So this is really a talent or an ability that's designed for different weapons, not for the Recon Lasgun. Then down here in this bottom right tree, we've got a couple of really excellent talents to pair with the Recon. First of which, and the most mandatory of which, is Reciprocity. You must have this in every Recon build. As you can see here, I've got a couple different ones that both have it. This Reciprocity talent is so good because it effectively adds up to 25% free crit chance all the time. All you have to do is dodge and attack any attack once every 8 seconds. It is incredibly easy to dodge attacks in this game. As you can see here, I'm let this guest spawn come at me. I just dodged him one time. I dodged him 2 times. I wasn't even dodging there. That counts as a dodge. That's gonna, one of these will count as a dodge, right? Oh, that was too early, right? But like, yeah. So you're gonna get this stacked up because when you're in combat, there's just passively normally so many random little enemies swinging at you and stuff, and that's gonna boost your crit rate up a ton and get you so that you can apply tons of Inferno stacks so that you are getting lots of crits and getting lots of ammo back as a result. So Reciprocity, definite must-have for any Recon build. Down here, though, we've also got Skirmisher, which is another huge banger if you can afford the points to get to it, because Skirmisher increases the base damage, as we said before. That's going to increase not only our direct damage, but our burn damage as well, and it's going to increase it up to 25%, which is massive. And this really synergizes well with the weapon because it's all about sprinting and sliding, and this weapon is fast. So as long as you're running and gunning and sliding around, you're going to have plenty of stacks of this. And if you're staying on the move, this is going to increase that damage just all the time. Huge, huge, huge increase. Talents that I don't think are all that good anymore. Agile Engagement is not very good on this weapon because it's only triggered on direct range damage, not on those burns. So you might not get the kill credit for actually shooting an enemy, because they might die to the burn instead. So Agile Engagement really doesn't work here. And Onslaught, for my money, is also not really that good either. Onslaught, unfortunately, is just kind of not all that great in the modern era of Darktide. It adds brittleness, but brittleness is really only effective against crushers. They're the only type of enemy that cares about being brittled at all. Everybody else kind of shrugs it off and takes almost 10%-ish, like 7-ish% increased damage when they're fully stacked on brittleness. Crushers do take a lot of increased damage from it, but for my money, we shouldn't be wasting 2 talent points to get this node here. We have much better points we could spend this on, and we can invest our money elsewhere. So let's not take Onslaught with the Recon Lasgun. It used to be in the past, by the way, that you would take Recon Lasgun, or take this with Recon, because it was so much more accessible. It was an obvious pick, because it was very close to other talents, but nowadays there's so many other juicers. Over here in the middle tree, though, we do have, oh, and by the way, I mentioned this earlier with Duck and Dive, so you could choose that if you're going for that sort of niche build with Strip Down, but probably not most of the time, right? In this middle tree, of course, we've got Bring It Down, which is going to help against those biggest targets, but by far the best piece of synergy in the entire tree with Recon, well, minus maybe 1, is Focus Target here. Focus Target not only increases the damage the enemy takes, but also, if you have this node right here, Redirect Fire, it can give you a buff of up to 15%. So that is a flat damage buff, meaning it's applying to both your direct damage and your burns, and this is a damage taken for the enemy, which means it's taking extra damage from burns and direct damage and your team, so it's huge, right? It is a massive, massive increase in damage. Let me spawn a Chaos Spawn here, and I'll show you. We're gonna go from 376 to 503 with the application of those stacks. Right, so that is a massive, massive jump. And yeah, definitely boosts your damage to the moon there. So make certain we are taking this with most Recon builds. It's by far the best. And really, the Weapon Specialist and Marksman's Focus Keystones don't really offer a whole lot for this weapon at all, because they're more about direct damage and weapon swapping, which isn't really what we're about here. In this left side column, this seems like might be good range damage, but it's not, because he applies to only the direct damage, and that's not really that much of the damage of the gun. Then Precision Strikes, hey, you know what? This is good on both melee and range, so we would probably take this node here to get that extra headshot damage. It's not bad, it's very good, in fact. And then Fully Loaded, 25% extra maximum ammo, and this is all before the ultimate node for the Recon, which is Shock Trooper. Now, I'm not taking it in this build right here, but Shock Trooper, it's a big investment to get to. As you can see, it requires you to take this extra minor node here of stamina regeneration delay reduction, and that's not actually that powerful a node, generally, but it is such a powerful talent that oftentimes it's worth it, because this effectively extends your ammo capacity infinitely. every percentage of crit that you have is an extra percentage of ammo, not only total, but in your magazine. So when you have a high crit rate, and you've got your recon up, let me show you. Let's get some dodges in here. If I get some, there we go. Get my dodge rate up. Oh, that was too slow. Dodge, no, dodge, and one more. Okay, oh, there we go. Okay, so now watch my ammo, right? Watch my ammo consumption. You see how slow it's going down? It's because I have 30% extra crit rate on here. So I can shoot this guy like my magazine is 30% larger. It has a 30% higher rate of applying those burns, right? A crit is so valuable here, and that is why, because Shock Trooper can effectively make your magazine super stupid deep, and it also just makes your ammo economy overall just godly. So yeah, the Shock Trooper is probably the one that you see most players using here because it makes you completely independent of ammo. You don't have to really give a fuck about ammo at all unless you've been shooting unimpeded for minutes at a time. And yeah, that's sort of the rundown on talents here. There's not a whole lot else that is of interest in here. I think that there are some arguments, like I have here, some arguments for builds that don't use the Shock Trooper. You'll just have to be a little bit more aware of your ammo when you're playing around like this. But we do still have survivalists and stuff to compensate for that. Now, of course, we just have to talk about how to play with this weapon. As I stated before, it's really simple. What you need to do is you need to get your crit rate up by dodging stuff. You need to use all of your damage increasing buffs that can increase not only the direct damage, but the range damage, but the burn damage, all that stuff together, and then just, you know, focus burn on a target. So a target like this, if we get our sprint stacks up for our skirmisher, that's 25% damage. We can also tag him up. That's going to mean he's taking 30% additional damage. And then we can use our infiltrate, which is going to be 30% additional damage done. And we end up with damage that looks like this. And so, yeah, this is the power of the Recon Lasgun, is that imagine if I had my actual stacks of crit up and I was doing 30% of those as crits. Yeah, that's the power of Recon Lasgun, is that with just one magazine ammo, we can absolutely tear through damage and multiply that out across tons of enemies. And I don't think I really need to teach you how to use this weapon. For my money, I don't even like attempt to fire at heads or anything. I just aim for center mass with this thing, and oftentimes I don't even scope in because it seems to have such a wide sort of a hit scan radius. So yeah, just kind of when you see an enemy, you just kind of blast in their general direction, and then you just watch them die. I don't think I really need to give you too much of a tutorial. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you are excited to use the Recon Lasgun out there. It is certainly my favorite weapon on the veteran. And I'll see you real soon. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.